Welcome to my channel. Subscribe to hear the latest story.
The phone call came at 7:15 that morning, just as I was adjusting Jake's graduation cap for the third time. My mother's voice carried that familiar tone of manufactured regret that I'd learned to recognize over the years. "Eric, honey, I'm so sorry, but your father and I just can't make it to Jake's dinner tonight. Money's really tight this month and we simply can't swing the restaurant bill." I stared at my 8-year-old son in his tiny cap and gown, his face bright with excitement about his elementary school graduation ceremony. "It's okay, Mom. We understand completely." But as I hung up and watched Jake practice his walk across our living room, something cold settled in my stomach. The empty seats where his grandparents should have been sitting would speak louder than any excuse ever could. After the ceremony, Jake and I headed to Murphy's Diner on 5th Street, our usual celebration spot when money was tight. The red vinyl booths and checkered floors weren't fancy, but Jake loved their chocolate chip pancakes shaped like graduation caps. He kept pulling out his tablet, scrolling through photos his classmates were posting from their own family celebrations. "Ah, look, Dad, Tommy's whole family went to that new steakhouse downtown," Jake said, showing me pictures of elegantly plated food and champagne glasses. "And Sarah's grandparents flew in from California just for tonight." I smiled and cut into my meatloaf, trying to keep the mood light. "Well, buddy, we're making our own special memories right here. Sometimes the best celebrations are the quiet ones." Jake nodded, but I could see him watching other families through the window groups of 3 generations walking together toward upscale restaurants. Around 9 o'clock, his face suddenly went pale as he stared at his tablet screen. "Dad?" His voice came out small and confused. I think there's something you need to see." My stomach dropped before I even looked. There on Instagram, posted barely an hour ago, were photos from my sister Amanda's account. The first image showed our parents sitting in an elegant private dining room, champagne flutes raised in celebration. Behind them, gold balloons spelled out "Honors Students" across dark wood paneling. I swiped to the next photo. My father, wearing the same blue shirt he'd claimed was too wrinkled for Jake's ceremony, had his arm around Amanda's twin daughters, both wearing expensive new dresses. My mother beamed beside them, holding a congratulatory banner. The third photo made my chest tighten. It was a close-up of the table laden with appetizers, prime rib, and a chocolate cake decorated with mortar boards. The timestamp showed 8:30 p.m., exactly when Jake and I were splitting a piece of pie at Murphy's. "These are from tonight, aren't they?" Jake asked quietly. I couldn't speak. I kept swiping through the photos, each one a fresh knife twist. My parents toasting Amanda's daughters. My mother helping them cut their cake. My father paying what was clearly a substantial bill without any sign of the financial stress they'd claimed that morning. The final photo was captioned, "So proud of our honor roll, graduate's grandparents' treat at Fleming's Prime Steakhouse. What a perfect night. Did they forget about me, Dad?" Jake's question came out barely above a whisper. I cleared my throat, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Excuse me for just a minute, buddy. I need to use the restroom." In the diner bathroom, I called Amanda's number with shaking hands. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. Finally, I sent a text to my mother. "Saw the photos. I thought money was tight." Her response came within minutes. "What photos? I don't know what you're talking about." I screenshot Amanda's Instagram stories and sent them to my mother's phone. My hands were trembling as I waited for her response. When my phone rang 2 minutes later, my mother's voice was frantic. "Eric, sweetie, this was completely last minute. Amanda called crying about the girls' report cards, and your father just felt so bad for her. We didn't plan this, I swear. You're wearing the outfit you picked out 3 days ago for Jake's graduation," I said quietly. "The private room has a reservation card on the table. This wasn't last minute, Mom." The silence stretched between us until she finally whispered, "We can explain everything. But as I hung up and walked back to Jake, who was carefully folding his napkin and trying not to look like he'd been crying, I realized that explanations wouldn't change what my son had just learned about his place in our family's hierarchy. That night, after Jake fell asleep clutching his graduation certificate, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop pieces of a larger puzzle finally clicking into place. I opened Facebook and began scrolling backward through months of family photos, seeing everything with new clarity. Jake's birthday party from March came flooding back. My parents had called that morning with sincere apologies, claiming my father had a work emergency that couldn't be postponed. Yet there they were in Amanda's photos from that same afternoon, cheering at her daughter's dance recital 2 towns over. In the background of one photo, I could see gift bags with the dance studio's logo clearly purchased that day. I remembered Jake asking me that evening why his grandparents hadn't come to his party when they'd promised. I'd made excuses about adult responsibilities and unexpected work situations. He'd nodded with that mature understanding that 8-year-olds shouldn't have to develop. Christmas morning painted an even clearer picture. My parents had arrived at our house 2 hours late, claiming traffic delays. But Amanda's social media told the real story. They'd spent Christmas morning at her house, first opening presents with her family around a tree laden with expensive gifts. When they finally reached our modest apartment, they brought leftover items clearly purchased as afterthoughts. I remembered Jake sitting by the window from 8 a.m. until 10:30, asking every few minutes when Grandma and Grandpa would arrive. When they finally showed up with wilted flowers and a board game still in a pharmacy bag, Jake had hugged them with genuine excitement while I made coffee and tried to hide my disappointment. I pulled out my filing cabinet and found last year's holiday credit card statements. There it was in black and white, a $400 charge at FAO Schwartz. On December the 23rd, the same day, my parents claimed they were shopping for everybody on a tight budget. Jake had received a $20 puzzle that Christmas. My phone buzzed with a text from my childhood friend Marcus. "Hey man, saw the graduation photos online. You holding up okay?" I called him immediately. "What do you mean you saw photos?" "Amanda posted that whole steakhouse thing. But didn't Jake graduate tonight too? I was expecting to see pictures of his celebration." "Marcus," I said slowly, "how long have you noticed this pattern with my parents?" The pause on the other end told me everything. "Eric, I didn't want to say anything because it's not my place, but yeah, I've been seeing it for a couple years now. Last summer when I ran into your dad at Home Depot, he was buying expensive patio furniture. Said it was a surprise for Amanda's new deck. But didn't you ask him for help with Jake's bike that same week?" The memory hit like a physical blow. Jake's bicycle had been stolen from our apartment complex and he'd been devastated. When I'd asked my father about potentially helping with a replacement, he'd explained that their fixed income couldn't handle unexpected expenses. Jake had ridden a secondhand bike I'd found on Craigslist, while his cousins got new everything. "I've seen your parents at Amanda's daughter's soccer games," Marcus continued gently, "multiple times. But Jake's been playing baseball for 2 seasons, and I've never seen them at his games." After we hung up, I called Sarah, Jake's mother, despite the late hour. Our divorce had been amicable, and she'd always been honest about family dynamics. "Sarah, can I ask you something about my parents and Jake?" "Oh, Eric." She sighed immediately. "I was wondering when you'd finally see it clearly. You've noticed too, Honey Jake asked me last month why his cousins always get bigger presents from Grandma and Grandpa. He wanted to know if he'd done something wrong to make them love him less." I didn't know how to answer that question without making it worse. The weight of that revelation settled on my chest like concrete. My son had been processing this rejection for months, trying to figure out what he'd done to deserve less love from his own grandparents. "There's something else," Sarah added quietly. "I've been keeping notes about the differential treatment in case it ever became relevant for custody discussions. Not that I think you're the problem, Eric, but Jake's emotional well-being is my priority." After hanging up, I spent 3 more hours documenting everything I could remember. The pattern wasn't subtle once I stopped making excuses for it. My parents had missed Jake's school play his baseball games, his parent-teacher conferences, and every birthday party for the past 2 years. But they'd attended every single event for Amanda's daughters, often posting about their pride and involvement. Around 2 a.m., I discovered something that made my blood run cold. While looking for my father's email address in my phone, I accidentally opened our shared family cloud account. There, in the shared photos folder, were dozens of pictures I'd never seen before. My parents with Amanda's family at amusement parks, fancy restaurants, weekend trips to the beach. In every single photo, my parents looked genuinely happy and engaged. They weren't going through the motions or fulfilling obligations. They were creating meaningful memories with Amanda's children while consistently finding excuses to avoid similar experiences with Jake. As dawn broke through my kitchen window, I finally understood the truth. This wasn't about money schedules or misunderstandings. My parents had made a conscious choice about which grandchildren deserved their time, attention, and financial support. And Jake, through no fault of his own, had been relegated to the bottom of their priority list. By Monday morning, my anger had crystallized into something much more dangerous clarity. I sat at my desk during my lunch break, combing through bank records and email confirmations, building a financial timeline that revealed the true scope of the favoritism. The numbers were staggering. Over the past 18 months, I'd covered 3 major emergency expenses for my parents, $8,000 for my father's dental work after his insurance denial, $4,000 for the cardiac procedure he'd needed in October, $6,000 to help them avoid foreclosure when my father's hours were cut at the factory. Each time they'd approached me with tearful explanations about their desperation. Each time I'd emptied my emergency fund or taken on credit card debt to help them. Each time they'd promised to pay me back when things improved. But things never improved for them to help me. When Jake needed emergency room treatment for a broken wrist last summer, I'd paid the $3,000 deductible alone. While Amanda's family took a vacation to Disney World, complete with photos of my parents enjoying the Magic Kingdom with their favorite granddaughters, I pulled up my Venmo app and made a discovery that sent rage coursing through my veins. My parents were linked to Amanda's account, and their transaction history was visible. Monthly payments of $500 labeled household help. $750 marked education fund every few months. A $1,000 transfer just last week labeled car repair emergency. While I struggled to rebuild my savings after each family crisis, Amanda was receiving regular financial support disguised as occasional help. The same parents who claimed they couldn't afford Jake's graduation dinner were sending my sister over $1,000 every month. I scrolled further back and found the most infuriating discovery yet. The same week my parents claimed they couldn't help with Jake's summer camp fees, they'd sent Amanda $2,000 marked household emergency. Jake had spent that summer at a free program through the local community center, while his cousins attended an expensive arts camp. My phone rang, snapping me back to the present. My father's voice sounded strained. "Eric, I got a call from the cardiac center about that October procedure. Something about payment processing issues." The medical bill. In my emotional turmoil over the weekend, I'd completely forgotten about the payment I'd made just before discovering the graduation dinner betrayal. The check had been sitting in processing over the weekend due to bank delays. What kind of processing issues? I asked, though my mind was already racing ahead to a possibility that both terrified and thrilled me. They said there might be insufficient funds or a stop payment order, but that's impossible, right? "You sent that money months ago." I pulled up my banking app and stared at the pending transaction. $4,000 still showing as processing due to the weekend delay and the medical center's antiquated payment system. One phone call could stop this payment. One decision could shift the entire power dynamic of our family relationship. "Eric, you still there, son?" "Son, The word hit differently now, loaded with all the conditional love and expectations I'd never recognized before. I was their son when they needed money, their afterthought when Jake needed grandparents. "I'll call the bank and check on it, Dad." After hanging up, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, weighing a decision that would change everything. My parents had built their security on my reliability while treating Jake as expendable. They'd counted on my emotional maturity and financial stability to bail them out while systematically favoring Amanda's family. The tipping point came when I remembered Jake's question from Saturday night, "Did they forget about me, Dad?" I called the bank's customer service line. "I need to place a stop payment on a check that's currently processing. Can you provide the check number and amount, sir?" Check number 4173. $4,000 to Riverside Cardiac Center. "May I ask the reason for the stop payment?" I looked at my reflection in the car's rearview mirror, seeing a man who'd spent years accepting crumbs while providing everything. Change of circumstances. "The stop payment fee is $35, and we'll process this immediately. Is that acceptable?" "Yes." 20 minutes later, I received a confirmation email. The payment had been voided due to account holder request. I took a screenshot of the cancellation notice, my hands surprisingly steady. I opened a text message to my parents and attached the screenshot. Below it, I typed 2 words, "payment voided." Then I turned off my phone and drove back to work, feeling simultaneously like I'd burned down a bridge and finally learned how to build one. The pounding on my apartment door started at 6:27 a.m., aggressive enough to wake Jake in the bedroom down the hall. I glanced through the peephole and saw my father standing in the hallway, his face flushed red above a hastily thrown-on coat over pajamas. Behind him in the parking lot, I could see my mother sitting in their idling car, her silhouette tense and upright. "Eric, open this door right now." His voice carried the authority he'd used when I was 12. But something fundamental had shifted in our dynamic. I wasn't 12 anymore, and his authority was no longer automatic. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door calmly. "Good morning, Dad. You're up early. Coffee?" His eyes were wild, a mixture of panic and fury I'd rarely seen. He pushed past me into the living room, clutching his phone like evidence in a criminal trial. "What the hell did you do with that medical payment? The cardiac center called me at 6 a.m. saying the check bounced." 6 a.m., Eric? "Actually," I said, walking to the kitchen and starting the coffee maker with deliberate normalness, "the payment was voided, not bounced. There's a difference. Would you like cream with your coffee?" "I don't want coffee. I want to know why my son destroyed my credit rating over some petty family disagreement." The words hung in the air between us. Some petty family disagreement. I turned to face him fully, and something in my expression must have changed because he took a half step backward. "Sit down, Dad." "I don't want to sit down. I want you to call the bank right now and fix this disaster before your mother has a heart attack in that car." "Sit down, Dad." My voice carried a tone I'd never used with him before, calm and immovable. "We're going to have a conversation that's been 4 years overdue." He remained standing, but his bluster seemed to deflate slightly. I pulled out the manila folder I'd prepared the night before, setting it on the coffee table between us. "This contains bank statements, Venmo screenshots, and a timeline of financial transactions involving our family over the past 4 years. Before you threaten legal action or accuse me of petty behavior, I want you to look at some numbers." I opened the folder to the first page, a spreadsheet I'd created showing every emergency payment I'd made to help my parents. $18,400 over 4 years, not including smaller amounts for groceries, utilities, and miscellaneous crises. "You remember each of these emergencies, Dad: the dental work, the mortgage crisis, the car repairs, the medical bills. Each time you and Mom called me crying about your desperate situation. Each time I emptied my savings to help you." His face was still red, but confusion was replacing anger. "You're our son. That's what family does." I flipped to the next page, Amanda's Venmo transaction history with my parents. regular monthly payments totaling over $32,000 during the same 4-year period. This is what family does for Amanda. Monthly support payments, emergency funds that aren't emergencies, educational expenses for children whose parents earn more money than I do. The silence stretched between us until he finally sat down heavily on my couch. Amanda needs more help than you do. Why? The simple question seemed to stump him. She has 2 children to support. I have 1 child to support, and I'm a single parent. Amanda is married to a man who earns $60,000 a year. I earn $42,000. By what logic does she need more help? She calls us when things get difficult. She asks for help. And when have I been allowed to call you crying? When have I been permitted to be anything other than perfectly capable and financially independent? He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could see him processing the implications of what I was saying. Dad, you've punished me for being emotionally strong and financially responsible. Every time I handle a crisis alone, you assume I don't need support. Every time Amanda falls apart, you rush to rescue her. Do you see the problem with this pattern? My mother's footsteps on the stairs interrupted us. She appeared in the doorway, mascara streaked and clutching tissues. Eric, honey, please, just fix the payment situation. We can work out our differences, but your father's health depends on maintaining his medical care. Mom, sit down. We're having the conversation you've both avoided for years. She perched on the edge of my armchair, looking between me and my father like she was watching a tennis match she didn't understand. This isn't about the money, I continued. This is about Jake. This is about my 8-year-old son, asking me if his grandparents forgot about him while you celebrated his cousins at a restaurant you claimed you couldn't afford. My mother's face crumpled. We love Jake just as much as we love Amanda's girls. Prove it. What do you mean? I pulled out another sheet of paper. I've documented every family event over the past 2 years. Jake's birthday parties, baseball games, school plays, parent-teacher conferences. You've attended 0. Amanda's daughter's events that you've attended 23. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment. My father stared at the paper, his anger completely replaced by something that looked like shame. You attend every soccer game, every recital, every academic ceremony for Amanda's children. But you've never seen Jake hit a baseball. You've never watched him perform in a school play. You send Amanda money for educational expenses, while Jake's summer camp fees come out of my emergency fund. We assumed you could handle things, my mother whispered. You assumed wrong. Being capable of handling things alone doesn't mean I should have to. Being emotionally stable doesn't disqualify me from receiving the same support you give Amanda. And most importantly, being your strongest child doesn't mean my son deserves to be your least favorite grandchild. My father stood up abruptly, pacing toward the window. So what do you want, Eric? You want us to apologize for helping Amanda when she needs it? I want you to help me understand why capability is punished in this family, while helplessness is rewarded. I want to know why my financial contributions to your emergencies are expected, while your financial support for Jake's needs is unavailable. And I want to understand why my son has to watch his cousins receive love and attention that never comes his way. The room fell silent except for the coffee maker finishing its cycle. My father stared out the window at the parking lot where other families were beginning their Tuesday morning routines, completely unaware that our family was fracturing in real time. You're right, he said finally, so quietly I almost missed it. What? You're right. We've taken your strength for granted, and we've failed Jake. He turned back to face us, his expression older than I'd ever seen it. But Eric, that medical payment? We genuinely can't afford to lose our relationship with that cardiac center. I stood up and walked to the window beside him. Dad, Jake graduates from middle school in 4 years. If you want to be there, if you want him to believe his grandparents love him as much as they love his cousins, You have exactly 4 years to prove it, with actions, not words. The ultimatum hung between us like a bridge that could either be crossed or burned. In the silence that followed, I could hear Jake stirring in his bedroom, getting ready for another day of school, completely unaware that his grandfather was finally learning what it felt like to lose control of a relationship he'd taken for granted. My parents left my apartment that morning without any resolution, promising to think about everything and work something out. But within 3 hours, my phone was ringing with Amanda's number, and her voice came through like a tornado siren. "Yalkit, what the hell do you think you're doing?" she screamed before I could even say hello. "Dad called me crying about some vindictive stunt you pulled with his medical payment. Are you out of your mind?" I walked out to my balcony and closed the sliding door, keeping my voice level. "Amanda, have you seen the financial records I showed Dad this morning? I don't care about your little spreadsheets and bank statements. You're destroying this family over petty jealousy." Petty jealousy. I repeated the phrase, tasting its absurdity. "Amanda, over the past 4 years, I've sent our parents $18,400 in emergency funds. How much have you contributed to their emergencies?" The line went quiet for a moment. "I help them in other ways. By receiving $32,000 in monthly support payments, once Bausterbassenti Tausenkiem." Another silence, longer this time. "I don't know what you think you found, but I found Venmo records, Amanda. Monthly payments to you totaling more than most people's yearly salary. While I've been emptying my savings to cover Dad's medical bills, you've been receiving regular financial support for what exactly?" My situation is complicated. Your situation is that you're married to a man who earns $60,000 a year, you have dual incomes, and you've been receiving secret family funding, while I struggle as a single father. Meanwhile, our parents claim they can't afford Jake's graduation dinner. Jake's graduation dinner. Her voice shifted, becoming uncertain. "What does that have to do with anything?" "You posted photos from Fleming's Prime Steakhouse on Saturday night. The same night, Mom called me claiming they couldn't afford to take Jake to dinner because money was too tight." The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its edge. "Eric, I didn't know they'd canceled on Jake." "Of course you didn't know, because you've been living in a bubble where our parents' financial struggles are real enough to justify your monthly allowance, but not real enough to prevent expensive celebrations for your daughters. It's not like that. Then explain to me what it is like, Amanda. Explain how it's fair that your children get private dining rooms and professional photos while mine gets canceled plans and empty promises." She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, my phone started buzzing with texts from extended family members. My Aunt Patricia called first. "Eric, honey, I just got off the phone with your mother. She's beside herself about some payment issue, but more importantly, she told me about Jake's graduation situation. I have to tell you, I've been watching this favoritism pattern for years, and I'm proud of you for finally addressing it. The validation hit me like a warm wave. You've seen it too. Sweetheart, everyone's seen it. Your cousin David went through something similar before he moved to Oregon. The family dynamic where one child is expected to be the emotional and financial caretaker, while the other receives all the support. It's not healthy, and it's not fair to the grandchildren." Patricia spent 20 minutes sharing observations I'd never heard from anyone else in the family. How my parents lit up when talking about Amanda's daughters but rarely mentioned Jake. How they displayed photos of Amanda's family prominently but kept pictures of Jake in a drawer. How they planned elaborate birthday celebrations for my nieces while forgetting Jake's birthday entirely last year. The hard part, Patricia warned, is that challenging this dynamic will get worse before it gets better. Your parents have built their sense of family around Amanda's neediness and your independence. Changing that threatens their entire emotional framework. An hour later, my cousin David called from Portland. "I heard through the family grapevine that you finally had the conversation with Uncle Robert and Aunt Linda. How are you holding up?" I'm discovering that everyone in the family has seen this pattern except me. That's how family dysfunction works, Eric. The person in the middle of it is always the last to see it clearly. I went through something similar with my parents before I moved across the country. They were so focused on rescuing my brother from every crisis that they forgot I existed unless they needed something. David's story was eerily similar to mine. He'd been the responsible son who handled emergencies alone, while his brother received constant financial and emotional support. When David finally confronted the disparity, his parents accused him of being selfish and ungrateful. The truth is, David continued, some families operate on crisis and rescue cycles. Your parents feel needed when Amanda falls apart so unconsciously, they enable her helplessness. Meanwhile, your strength threatens their sense of purpose because you don't need rescuing. While I was processing this insight, Amanda was apparently launching her counterattack on social media. She posted a cryptic message about family members who create drama during difficult times, and some people who can't handle others receiving blessings. Her friends immediately began commenting with supportive messages about family jealousy and toxic relatives. But Amanda made a crucial miscalculation. She called Sarah Jake's mother, attempting to gather allies for her position. Sarah called me that evening, her voice tight with controlled anger. Eric, your sister, just spent 40 minutes on the phone trying to convince me that you're having some kind of emotional breakdown over normal family dynamics. What did you tell her? I told her exactly what I think about grandparents who treat their grandchildren differently based on which parent they belong to. I explained that I've been documenting the favoritism pattern because it affects Jake's emotional well-being, and I made it very clear that if this differential treatment continues, it will become a factor in custody considerations. Amanda had overplayed her hand. By bringing Sarah into the conflict, she'd forced Jake's mother to take sides, and Sarah's loyalty was unquestionably with her son's emotional health. Amanda panicked when she realized I wasn't going to support her version of events. Sarah continued. She started asking questions about what I'd observed and whether I thought Jake had been harmed by the favoritism. When I confirmed that Jake has definitely been affected, she got very quiet. That evening, Amanda deleted all her social media posts about family drama. But by then, the damage to her position was complete. Her attempt to paint me as the problematic family member had backfired, exposing her own role in perpetuating harmful dynamics. Meanwhile, my parents sent a series of increasingly desperate texts. My father threatened to take legal action over the voided payment. But when I asked what law I'd broken by canceling my own check, he couldn't provide an answer. My mother alternated between guilt trips and promises to try harder with Jake, but her efforts felt performative rather than genuine. The family fracture was widening, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I'd spent so long accommodating everyone else's emotional needs that I'd forgotten what it felt like to advocate for my own child's well-being. That night, as Jake did his homework at the kitchen table, he looked up at me with serious eyes. Dad, are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us? They're not mad, buddy. They're learning some important things about how to be better grandparents. Will they still love me if they have to be different? The question broke my heart and strengthened my resolve simultaneously. Jake, people who truly love you will want to be better for you. And if they don't want to be better, then their love wasn't really about you in the first place. He nodded with that 8-year-old wisdom that comes from observing adult behavior more closely than adults realize. I hope they want to be better. Me too, buddy, me too. Over the next week, I worked with a family therapist to create a comprehensive proposal for repairing our family relationships. The document was 6 pages long and outlined specific measurable changes that would demonstrate equal treatment of all grandchildren. The requirements were straightforward, but non-negotiable. My parents needed to attend at least 2 of Jake's school or sports events for every one of Amanda's children's events they attended. They needed to plan and fund equal celebrations for all grandchildren's milestones. Most importantly, any financial support provided to one adult child needed to be offered equally to the other, or explained with objective criteria that Jake could understand when he was older. When I presented the proposal to my parents the following Sunday, my father's initial reaction was explosive. "This is ridiculous. You're trying to control our relationships with our own grandchildren. Dad, this is exactly what you've been doing to me for 4 years. You've controlled my relationship with you through financial dependence and guilt manipulation. Now you're experiencing what it feels like when someone else sets the terms." My mother studied the document more carefully. "Eric, some of these requirements seem very specific, like requiring equal gift budgets and equal time investments. Doesn't that make everything feel artificial? Mom, would you rather have artificial equality or authentic favoritism? Because those are your only two choices right now." The conversation was interrupted by Amanda's arrival. She'd organized what she called a family intervention, inviting my Aunt Patricia, my Uncle James, and my cousin Michael to convince me to stop being unreasonable. But Amanda had severely miscalculated the family dynamics. When she presented her case about my emotional instability and financial manipulation, she expected automatic support. Instead, the extended family members began asking pointed questions about the favoritism patterns they'd observed for years. Uncle James, who'd remained neutral in family conflicts for decades, spoke up first. "Amanda, I've been watching your parents attend every single one of your daughter's activities while missing Jake's events consistently. Can you explain why that seems fair to you?" Amanda's face flushed. "They attend what they can attend. Everyone has scheduling conflicts. They attended 17 of your daughter's events last year," I said, quietly consulting my documentation. "They attended 0 of Jake's. That's not a scheduling conflict. That's a choice." Cousin Michael, who had teenage children of his own, leaned forward. "Amanda, if your in-laws treated your daughters the way your parents treat Jake, how would you react?" "That's completely different." "How is it different?" Aunt Patricia asked. The intervention was backfiring spectacularly. Instead of pressuring me back into compliance, the family meeting was exposing the extent of the favoritism to relatives who'd suspected but never seen clear evidence. But the most damaging moment for Amanda came when her husband Tom spoke up. He'd been sitting quietly in the corner, looking increasingly uncomfortable, as details about the family financial dynamics emerged. "Amanda, can we talk privately for a minute?" They stepped onto the back porch, but their voices carried through the screen door. Tom had just learned about the regular monthly payments from my parents' support that Amanda had never mentioned during their own financial planning discussions. "You told me our budget worked because of your superior money management skills." Tom's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Were you planning to mention the $1,000 monthly subsidy from your parents? It's not a subsidy, it's help with household expenses. Help that your brother doesn't receive despite being a single parent with lower income. Tom, you don't understand the family dynamics. I understand that you've been lying to me about our financial picture, while your nephew gets treated like a second-class family member." When they returned to the living room, Tom's expression had completely changed. He approached me directly. "Eric, I owe you an apology. I didn't know about the extent of the favoritism or the financial support disparity. Amanda led me to believe your parents helped both families equally." The admission hung in the air like a confession at a trial. Amanda's own husband was acknowledging the unfairness she'd spent an hour denying. My parents attempted one final resistance strategy. They agreed to attend family therapy, but walked out of the first session when the therapist asked them to commit to specific behavioral changes. "We're not going to let some stranger dictate how we love our grandchildren," my father declared as they left the therapist's office. "Then you're choosing not to love Jake in a way he can recognize," I replied. That evening, I sent a group text to my parents and Amanda. "I've tried explanation documentation, family meetings, and professional mediation. Nothing has convinced you that Jake deserves equal treatment. Effective immediately, I'm implementing a no-contact boundary until you demonstrate 6 consecutive months of equal grandparent behavior. This means equal attention, equal celebration, equal financial consideration, and equal priority. Jake deserves grandparents who choose him, not grandparents who tolerate him. Then I blocked their phone numbers, their social media accounts, and changed my home address in all shared family databases. For the first time in years, my phone stopped buzzing with crisis calls, guilt trips, and demands for emergency financial assistance. The silence felt strange at first, like a noise I'd grown used to had suddenly stopped. But within days, the quiet began feeling like peace. Jake and I established new routines without the constant emotional disruption of family drama. I started rebuilding my emergency fund without regular calls for financial help. Most importantly, Jake stopped asking when his grandparents would visit, and I watched his confidence grow as he stopped bracing for disappointment. 3 weeks into our no-contact boundary, Jake made an observation that crystallized everything. "Dad, I don't feel sad about Grandma and Grandpa anymore. Is that okay?" "It's more than okay, buddy. It means you're learning to protect your heart from people who don't know how to love you properly." Will they ever learn? I don't know, Jake, but I know that we're going to be fine either way. And for the first time in years, I truly believed that was true. 3 months into our no-contact boundary, something unexpected happened. The silence from my family was so complete that I began to wonder if they'd simply written us off entirely. But Jake was thriving in ways that surprised me. His grades improved, he became more outgoing with his friends, and he stopped that anxious habit of checking his phone for messages that never came. I used the money I would normally have sent to my parents' various emergencies to create a college savings account for Jake. We took a weekend trip to the coast, something we'd never been able to afford, while I was constantly depleting my savings for family crises. Jake built sandcastles and collected shells, completely absorbed in simple pleasures, without the undercurrent of waiting for grandparents who might or might not show up. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming in Amanda's carefully constructed world. Her husband, Tom, had become increasingly uncomfortable with the financial dependence on her parents, especially after learning how it contributed to Jake's mistreatment. He insisted that Amanda become financially independent, cutting off the monthly support that had been subsidizing their lifestyle for years. Amanda panicked. She'd grown accustomed to a standard of living that required her parents' financial backing. Without their monthly contributions, she couldn't afford her daughter's expensive activities, their private tutoring, or the new car payment she'd taken on, assuming the support would continue. She called my parents crying, begging them to convince Tom that the financial help was necessary. But Tom had drawn a hard line. Either Amanda learned to live within their actual means, or their marriage would face serious problems. Meanwhile, my parents were discovering what life looked like without their reliable financial safety net. Another medical bill arrived for my father's cardiac care, this time for a follow-up procedure that wasn't covered by insurance. When they asked Amanda to help cover the costs, she claimed financial hardship due to Tom's new restrictions on their budget. My Aunt Patricia called to fill me in on the family dynamics I was missing. "Eric, your parents are finally realizing that you were their financial backbone, not Amanda. She's been receiving support, not providing it. When they needed real help, Amanda couldn't step up the way you always did." The revelation was apparently devastating for my parents. They'd spent years taking my contributions for granted while treating Amanda as the family member who needed protection. But when they actually needed assistance, Amanda was nowhere to be found. "Your mother called me crying last week," Patricia continued. "She said they never realized how much they depended on your stability and generosity. They thought Amanda was the vulnerable one, who needed extra love and support. But you were the one actually holding the family together financially." 4 months after our last contact, my phone rang from an unknown number. When I answered, my mother's voice came through, but it sounded different than I'd ever heard it. Humble, broken, genuinely reflective. Eric, I know you blocked our regular numbers, but I'm calling from Patricia's phone because we need to talk. Mom, nothing has changed about my requirements. 6 months of demonstrated equal treatment before we consider contact. I'm not calling to negotiate, honey. I'm calling to tell you that you were right about everything. The admission hit me like a physical shock. In 35 years, I'd never heard my mother acknowledge being wrong about a family issue. Your father and I have been talking to a counselor about family dynamics and favoritism patterns. We've spent 4 months really examining our behavior, and Eric, we're horrified by what we see. She paused, and I could hear her crying softly. We punished you for being strong. We took your emotional maturity and financial responsibility for granted while enabling Amanda's helplessness. And worst of all, we made Jake pay the price for our dysfunction. Mom, please let me finish. We realize now that we turned you into the family caretaker while treating Amanda like the family baby. We expected you to handle every crisis alone while rushing to rescue her from every challenge. And we taught Jake that love is conditional on neediness rather than unconditional based on belonging. The conversation was surreal. These weren't the defensive excuse-making parents I'd known my entire life. Something fundamental had shifted in their perspective. We want to ask if you'd consider meeting with us, just once, at a neutral location, with specific changes we want to show you, not just promise you. Against my better judgment, but curious about what specific changes meant, I agreed to meet them at a family restaurant the following Saturday. I brought Jake, but warned him that this didn't mean anything permanent was changing. When we arrived, my parents were already seated in a corner booth, and the first thing I noticed was the wrapped gift box beside my father's plate. It wasn't just any present. It was clearly expensive, thoughtfully chosen, and sized for an 8-year-old. My father stood up when he saw Jake, and his eyes filled with tears. Jake, I owe you an apology that's 4 months overdue. Grandpa has been a very poor grandfather, and that's not your fault. That's mine. Jake approached cautiously, but when my father knelt down to his eye level, something in his demeanor reassured my son. I missed your graduation dinner because I made a bad choice about priorities. I missed your birthday party because I thought work was more important than you. I missed your baseball games because I was at your cousin's events instead. None of that was fair to you, and I'm sorry. The directness of the apology caught me off guard. No excuses, no justifications, just accountability. My mother was crying openly now. Jake, Grandma loves you just as much as she loves your cousins, but I haven't been showing you that love equally. I want to learn how to be the grandmother you deserve. They'd brought a photo album they'd created specifically for Jake, filled with pictures of him from birth through his recent graduation. Pictures I didn't even know they had. On the last page, they'd written a letter promising to attend his baseball games, his school events, and his future celebrations with the same enthusiasm they'd shown for Amanda's children. We've already bought season tickets to Jake's baseball league, my father said. Front row seats for every home game. And we've marked his middle school graduation on our calendar for 4 years from now. The gesture was more symbolic than practical, but it demonstrated forward-thinking commitment rather than vague promises about trying harder. Over the next 2 hours, my parents outlined specific changes they'd made. They'd cut off Amanda's monthly financial support, explaining that equal treatment meant equal independence expectations. They'd enrolled in family therapy to understand favoritism patterns. Most importantly, they'd created a written agreement with themselves about equal gift budgets, equal time investments, and equal celebration planning for all grandchildren. Jake remained cautious throughout the meal, but when my father asked about his upcoming baseball season, my son's face lit up with genuine excitement. For the first time in years, he had a grandfather who wanted to hear about his interests rather than enduring them politely. As we prepared to leave, my mother pulled me aside. Eric, I know we have years of repair work ahead of us, but I want you to know that losing you and Jake taught us what we'd taken for granted. You were the heart of this family's stability, and we treated you like the help. The healing process was slow and required constant vigilance. My parents had to unlearn years of dysfunctional patterns, while Jake and I learned to trust their consistency rather than their promises. But over the following months, genuine change became evident. They attended every one of Jake's remaining baseball games that season, cheering louder than any other grandparents in the stands. They planned Jake's 9th birthday party with the same enthusiasm they'd previously reserved for Amanda's daughters. Most importantly, they began treating Jake like a beloved grandchild, rather than an obligation. The financial boundaries remained firm. My parents learned to handle their own emergencies or ask both children equally for help. Amanda was forced to adjust her lifestyle to match her actual income, and while she initially resented the changes, her marriage improved once the financial deception ended. 6 months later, at Jake's end-of-season baseball awards ceremony, I watched my parents beam with pride as Jake received recognition for Most Improved Player. They took dozens of photos, posted them prominently on social media, and treated him to ice cream afterward just because they wanted to celebrate him. That night, as Jake got ready for bed, he asked me, "Dad, do you think Grandma and Grandpa really learned how to love me better?" I tucked his covers around him and smiled. "Buddy, I think they learned that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day through your actions. And they're choosing me now. They're choosing you now." The transformation wasn't perfect, and maintaining healthy family dynamics required ongoing effort from everyone involved. But Jake was finally experiencing the unconditional grandparent love he'd always deserved. And I learned that demanding respect had taught everyone in our family how to give it more freely. Sometimes the people who love us most take our strength for granted while enabling others' weakness. Teaching family members to value your contributions equally doesn't make you selfish. It makes you self-respecting. When you stop accepting less than you give, you teach everyone around you to give more than they take. True family love shouldn't punish capability or reward helplessness. The most important lesson Jake learned wasn't about family dynamics or equal treatment. He learned that his father would fight for him when he needed protection, and that love should never make you feel like you have to earn what others receive freely. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who took your strength for granted while favoring others? How did you protect your child's emotional well-being when family dynamics became harmful? Share your experiences in the comments below. And remember that demanding equal treatment isn't selfish, it's necessary for healthy relationships. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about family dynamics, personal boundaries, and finding strength in difficult situations. Share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar family challenges. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to Jake's story and mine. Remember that you deserve relationships that celebrate your strengths rather than exploit them. And your children deserve love that doesn't require them to compete for attention. Until next time, keep fighting for the respect you deserve and never stop protecting the people you love.